Guten Abend, my fellow Monday night travelers. My name is Ben Green, and together with my colleague Gabe Gunnink, we are going to whisk you away to a variety of lesser-known German destinations you should consider when next visiting this part of Central Europe. But first, I propose a toast to great backdoor travel and to great colleagues. Prost.
Prost, fam.
Prost, everyone. Good timing.
Always good timing when we're together. And this is a Riesling.
From
Yes.
the Rhine region, right, exactly. And what we have here, a German pretzel with beer cheese.
With beer cheese, of course. Sometimes we just have this food and we hardly eat it, but I'm definitely going to be eating whenever you're talking, Ben. So please eat whenever I'm talking.
Oh, thank you. I'll wait for the videos perhaps, but and don't worry, we have some for Emily as well. So it's not just Gabe and I munching away.
Now, before we get started, Ben, can you kind of introduce for us what do we mean when we say beyond the best of Germany? What are we basing that off of?
Yes, thank you very much, Gabe. We are going to take you to, you see it here, a variety of places that are primarily not on our tours, and some will be in our guidebook, and many of them are not. It'll be a mixture in that case, but these are going to be what we consider lesser visited travel destinations, particularly for Americans. We have, of course, here at Rick Steves Europe, our own Germany tours. So as I said, where we're going tonight will not be on these tours. That's almost the case entirely, right, Gabe? We do have excellent tours to the Germanic world. However, the 13-day best of Germany that you see here crisscrosses the country in a U shape from Hamburg to Berlin. We have Germany, Austria, and Switzerland in 14 days with a nice mixture of small towns and cities. We have precious little Munich, Salzburg, and Vienna, small but packs a punch, and it won the destination duel against the Germany show, an active 8 days here across Bavaria and Austria. And finally, we have Berlin, Prague, and Vienna in 12 days for great explorative travels along the former Iron Curtain.
And again, we feel that these tours are, especially that Best of Germany tour. Oh, I jumped ahead. That Best of Germany tour is the best place for first-time travelers to Germany who have yet to experience places like Berlin and Hamburg and Rothenburg. But having surveyed our Monday Night Travel audience, we know that many of you are avid travelers that have been to Europe many times and have been to a lot of these blockbuster places and are looking to explore beyond there. So our rule for ourselves tonight is that we cannot go to places on our tours, even though we think those places are where you should start. But for those who have already been to Germany and want to get to some further flung corners, we have Gabe and Ben's Beyond the Best of Germany train trip. Of course, we're taking the train so that we don't have to drive and we can keep drinking our Riesling. But we are going to start out in Lübeck and visit some other Hanseatic hubs. We're then going to go down to Leipzig, over to the beautiful Mosel Valley, down to Würzburg on the romantic Rhine, and we will finish kind of at the southern point in Lake Constance. I should point out about half of those destinations are in our guidebook. This is a map from the beginning of our guidebook showing all the places covered in the guidebook. So for those interested in Leipzig and Würzburg and the Mosel Valley, you will find that here. Otherwise, for the other destinations, they're beyond where we cover. So I recommend getting out a pen and paper. This is going to be fast-paced. We are just going to throw a lot of ideas at you and just see what sticks for you, what excites you, and what place you might want to go on your next Germanic adventure. So before we get started, though, let's talk about some Germany basics and travel skills that you'll need no matter where you go in Germany. It's good to know that Germany is the largest country in the European Union with 85 million people. It's the economic powerhouse of the EU and really a leader in democracy throughout the continent. People always want to know when to visit. Of course, it comes down to personal preference, but it is enjoyable weather April through October, depending on whether or not you want the milder spring and fall or the warmer summer. A lot of people also make a point to go to Germany in December for the Christmas markets and other holiday festivities. In terms of budgeting, for people that travel in the Rixtives Europe style, so staying at 2 or 3 star hotels that are family run, not eating at fancy restaurants every meal, taking care to look up the transit and sightseeing passes to save money, and all those details are in our guidebook. For people that travel in that way, we think that you can expect to spend about $165 per person per day. And of course, that currency, while I give it in dollars, the currency there is the euro. And Germany is still a place where you want to have some cash on hand just in case. What I do when I go is I get about 2 days worth of spending money from an ATM. I try to only use my card except when I really have to use cash. And then in the last couple days, I try to use up my cash. That's how I approach it. And in terms of transportation, you don't get too much better than Germany. You can get pretty much everywhere, certainly by bus and often by train, even some surprisingly small towns. And speaking of trains, Ben, you are going to teach us some quick rail information for Germany.
Thank you, Gabe. That was very well done. And yes, as Gabe mentioned, I have the pleasure of speaking to you about trains in Germany. Germany has one of the most comprehensive rail systems in Europe. And as Gabe said, even a large number of small towns and villages are reachable by train or public transit. Now, that doesn't mean that automatically renting a car is not a good idea for your trip. But in general, the system is very comprehensive. And I will say that there is an understanding that, or a myth perhaps, that German rail system is always on time. And that is not true. It used to be more true. Not every train is on time. That's been changing in recent years. So have a little patience, but it's still an excellent way to travel. Now, let's get into some details. This map here shows the major lines and the price of the full fare second-class ticket. If you are willing to sacrifice some flexibility and purchase tickets ahead, discounts can be well over 50%, I'd say even 75%, when purchased directly from the rail service Deutsche Bahn, and that's bahn.com, a few weeks or more in advance. However, for more nimble, flexible travel, the German Rail Pass is potentially a smart buy as well. It really all depends on your itinerary. You can compare the price of the pass to the price of the individual tickets on the website, and also consider the level of your desire to simply hop on and off the trains as you wish, which is the benefit of the pass. With the German Rail Pass, valid for a set number of days of your choosing, you may essentially hop on and off any nationally run train across the country. And for many travelers, one positive note is that Salzburg, even though it is in Austria, is considered the border town, so you can take the German train to Salzburg all the way. And finally, there are also regional day tickets, and they can be a fantastic value, particularly for multiple travelers. The price per person decreases the more people you have in your party. So, for example, the Bavarian day ticket, which is the largest federal state, really covers a large territory. And I will make two final points. Seat reservations are not included for train tickets in Germany. They are optional for a small fee, usually around €5. It's not a bad idea to get seat reservations, particularly on the longer distance high-speed trains, because as Gabe mentioned, Germany is an action-packed country with 85 million people. Some of the trains can be well occupied. And then finally, I'll mention again bahn.com, because that is such an excellent resource. You can go there to view train schedules across Europe, and you can purchase any German train ticket that starts or ends in the country. So the train doesn't have to be only in Germany. It could be a train into Austria, a train into Switzerland, etc. Bahn.com will sell you the ticket. So those are my notes on the German rail system. And now it is time to get into some destinations, specifically starting in the north on our Best of Germany train trip.
And you're starting us off in Lübeck, which means that it's time for me to get started on my pretzel.
Very good. I will let you do that, Gabe. Enjoy. It's a good pretzel. So I have the pleasure of sharing with you my favorite undiscovered region in Germany, and that is the north in the lands of the former Hanseatic League. What is the Hanseatic League? Well, it was a medieval trading league and a defensive network of guilds and communities across Northern Europe. It expanded from North Germany across multiple countries to include more than 200 settlements. From the 12th century to the 15th century, it was a powerhouse. The German traders increased their economic interdependence between one another and lowered tolls between Hanseatic communities, creating a powerful merchant network with a legacy that's still visible today, even after 500 to 700 years since it existed. And in a way, I will say that it shares many of the foundational aspects of the European Union, in fact. And Gabe, you mentioned that Lufthansa, the airline, has origins in the word Hansa. That's the word for the German word for the merchant guild. So it has its origins in this as well. So that's a brief note on the Hanseatic League. And I will now take you to several worthwhile destinations, a good overview of North Germany. So let's start with Bremen, a city with 2,000-year-old roots, and today one of the 3 German city-states, along with Hamburg and Berlin. Bremen is still referred to as a free Hanseatic city, so it just goes to show you how important that Hanseatic story really is. So facing the square here, we have the Rathaus, the city hall, which is the best preserved medieval city hall in Germany from about 1400. Bremen has a special relaxed vibe with a fairy tale charm. The center is littered with excellent restaurants, bars, museums, and entertainment. And Gabe, you've been to Bremen at least very briefly, right?
I did. I went for a run along the river and just happened upon that market square. And it's one of the most beautiful I've ever seen. And I knew nothing about Bremen beforehand. So full of surprises.
It is spectacular. Moving right along, we're going to go to my favorite city in northern Germany, and Gabe is probably very tired of hearing me rave about Lübeck, but I'm going to do it one more time for all of your benefit. So this is Lübeck. It is the founding city of the Hanseatic League, and this is actually the city hall here again. It has more than 1,000 historic buildings on a small island, and it's only 1 hour from Hamburg on the regional train, so it's very easy to access. This is the city gate, one of the first things you'll probably see when you enter Lübeck. It's known as the Holstädter from 1464. It is a national icon of Germany, in fact. Among the many historic buildings in Lübeck from the Hanseatic and medieval era is the Hospital of the Holy Spirit from the 13th century. It's one of the oldest hospitals in the world. It's a rare place for the sick and elderly in that time period. Now, Lübeck has a brick architecture, as you see here, with steep gables, and it is really just characteristic of Northern Europe and of the Hanseatic League. Whether you go to Gdansk or Bergen in Norway, you will see similar architecture to what's in Lübeck, but Lübeck is the founding city. Brick merchant buildings, such as these salt storehouses, line parts of the waterway. And you know, Lübeck looks good from every angle. I love strolling the old town in the evening. One of the best sites in the old town, which I didn't get a picture of, is actually the Hanseatic Museum. It's a fantastic modern museum that takes you through the rise, development, and fall of the Hanseatic League. And it's particularly valuable because the other great Hanseatic museum in Europe, which is in Bergen, has been under renovation for quite a long time. So this is definitely the best place to learn about this history. And I'll just add that, you know, the people you meet when you travel is one of the best souvenirs, one of the best memories. And when I was in Lübeck, I stayed at a German youth hostel. And above me in my bunk bed was, as it turned out, the director of food safety for Germany, a servant of Angela Merkel. And he was just a fantastic individual. He invited me for beer several times. I was just, you know, my lower 20s at that time, and we still connect to this day. I didn't get a picture with him even when we got there for a few nights in a row, but yeah, just one of my favorite memories of Lübeck, and maybe that's another reason why it's one of my favorites. So Lübeck is clearly a gem, as you can see, and I suggest you consider paying it a short visit at least when you next visit this area. Moving right along here, also 1 hour from Hamburg is Stade. And yes, this is a Hanseatic city as well, although it's much smaller. It's an idyllic North German town with many half-timbered buildings. And, you know, a place like this, it's really all about the atmosphere, about getting away from busy Hamburg, which is actually quite a large city, and experiencing the small town of North Germany. Great place to eat, get a pint, stroll. Okay, 75 minutes from Hamburg is Schwerin. Now, Schwerin doesn't have a merchant past like the Hanseatic cities, at least not a strong merchant past. It has a regal past, and you can see that regal past there in the upper corner. But it's a wonderful town, colorful buildings. You see the main square there, regularly has a market, and it is actually the capital of Mecklenburg-West Pomerania, one of the German federal states.
Mecklenburg-West Pomerania.
Yes.
Wow, just that.
Yes, Pomerania is a historic region which includes kind of northeastern Germany and North Poland. Yeah, and it's where the name of the Pomeranian dog comes from as well. Yeah, so if you like Pomeranians, I guess you should consider coming to this region. So as I say, Schwerin has a regal past, and it really feels that way. I kind of felt like I needed to wear a suit and tie when I was here, but no, that's not necessary. It has a beautiful lake in the center, and its crowning jewel, as I said before, is this Schloss from the 14th century, featuring a mix of architectural styles. Schwerin Castle or Schloss has Ottoman features, stunning Slavic onion domes, and Gothic turrets. And today it is actually this German federal state's parliament building. It's also set on an island, which features a marvelous garden. So very close to Schwerin is one of the prettiest little towns in the region, Wismar. Just higgledy-piggledy cobblestone streets, pedestrian center, more traditional gables as you see throughout northern Germany. The entire Wismar Old Town was UNESCO listed in 2002. And it has a more modernized Hanseatic harbor where you can find a whole array of excellent fish boats that sell local treats. And I had a very memorable light smoked salmon sandwich that I still recall vividly to this day. So although this section is really about Hanseatic cubs, I do want to just mention here that this region is on the coast, and therefore it does have beaches. Now, the weather in North Germany is on the cooler side on average, but if you have decent weather, you might consider stopping at a beach. And they have these traditional Strandkorb, which literally means beach baskets. This is just the stereotypical type of seating you see all across northern Germany. Very, very typical and idyllic. And there's also a fabulous set of islands off the German coast. Now, I went here, let's see, this was 5 years ago in July. I was the only non-German on the ferry to and from the island. It's an East Frisian island, and Spiekeroog is the name of this one. There are several others in a row. And really, the only thing you do here is hike, bike, relax, enjoy German nature at its finest without too many other people. And facing these East Frisian islands in the north are fishing towns, historic towns like New Harlingsiel. This area has been involved in the shrimp trade for centuries. And here you see actually a festival that I went to with some friends from this region once a year. All the fishing boats of New Harlingsiel get dollied up, and they invite the public to pour on, and they have a little race to see which boat is fastest. So you'll get a quick look at that here next. Typical northern Germany in July, my friends would say. Wet, cool, salty, but it fits. It's just right. And our boat didn't win, but I still treated myself to a shrimp sandwich as a reward for braving the North German waters. So a little bit more there for you on North Germany's coastal towns. So there you have it. That's my quick look at North Germany. You know, Americans love to visit the South, including Bavaria. And while there are many great reasons for that, we should not overlook the rich history and culture of the North. There are so many worthwhile places, including many beyond what I've shared with you here now. Okay, Gabe.
Thank you very much, Ben. I personally, at your suggestion, tried to go to Lubeck last year just for an afternoon while I was en route, and a downed tree over a rail line thwarted my attempts. So I could only see the outside of the city. So I would like to get to Lübeck someday. But for now, I'm going to take you all to Leipzig. So Leipzig grew up as playing second fiddle to its glamorous sister Dresden in the region of Saxony. Dresden is where the ruling elite were. Meanwhile, Leipzig was kind of the gritty economic powerhouse and trade hub of the region. Then, after World War II, it became second fiddle to East Berlin in East Germany. It was the second city of East Germany and really was kind of ground down into complete disrepair by the end of the East German tenure. Many people didn't even think it was salvageable, but salvage it they did. And Leipzig has now risen from the ashes and become a trendy, modern, mid-sized city. It feels kind of like a more laid-back version of Berlin to me. Many people first arrive at the Leipzig Hauptbahnhof, which is the largest train station in all of Europe by area. Also, you have a couple levels with hundreds of shops beneath the station in case you have any shopping needs. There is then the Altes Rathaus, the old town hall, which was built in the 16th century and is a great example of the German Renaissance style. In the early 20th century, it was updated to be much more difficult to say Stadtgeschichtlich Museum Leipzig. So it is the City Museum of Leipzig for those that want to learn more about the city's history. And on Tuesdays and Fridays, it is on the market square, and you have lively farmers markets that crop up on that square on Tuesdays and Fridays. One thing that I most enjoyed about Leipzig is all of its passages. So during its economic boom, the big commercial leaders decided that they wanted to tear down the quaint old town and build these large commercial buildings. These buildings aren't very attractive in and of themselves, but what's fun about them is that they're laced with all of these little passageways and hidden arcades so that you feel like you can kind of go treasure hunting for anything that you want to buy. On the right-hand side here, we have the Mädler Passage, which is one of the best shopping oases in town. But what I love about it as a literature nerd is that right in the entrance, we have these two statues depicting a scene from the play Faust by Goethe, who's kind of the Shakespeare of Germany. And Goethe actually went to the University of Leipzig, and he set this scene that's being depicted in the cellars of the Auersbach Keller restaurant, which is now very touristy because of this connection. But I think it's so cool that you can just travel to this exact place that is listed in the play that used to be a frequent haunt of the playwright. The title of the oldest arcade in Leipzig, though, goes to Spexhof, which features a number of gorgeous atriums with natural light cascading down over these beautiful murals and mosaics and paintings. Also, just inside the entrance, it has this magical fountain that if you rub your hand, if you have a damp hand and you rub it around the perimeter of the brim, the water inside kind of starts to bubble and it makes this loud reverberating sound, kind of like rubbing your finger around the edge of a wine glass, which I will not actually do now. Spare all of your ears. Moving forward on the Augustusplatz Plaza, there is, I think, my favorite building that I saw in Leipzig. It is the Leipzig University building. I think that it's a gorgeous blend of obviously hyper modern, but also aspects of traditional church architecture, as we can see on the facade there. And yet, when you go inside, there's a computer lab. It is a functioning university. It boasts famous alumni such as the playwright Goethe that I already mentioned, the philosopher Nietzsche, the composer Wagner, and the recent chancellor Angela Merkel is a graduate. Also on this same plots, if you were to turn around, you would see the building that houses the city orchestra and the opera house. And then to the left of the university is a building that's designed to look like kind of an open book, but the residents call it the wisdom tooth, but it has the best views in the city. Also inside the building is this terrifying cat that I don't think has any historical merit, but his name is George, and he was just begging to be included in this presentation. A few paces from the university is the Moritz Bastei Cultural Center, which is the last remaining part of the medieval foundations from the 16th century. Now built into these foundations is just a student pub and a cafe. Leipzig is actually one of the biggest coffee capitals of Germany and has a long tradition of coffee drinkers. It was not uncommon throughout history to see the city's elite, its politicians, its great thinkers, its artists talking about their craft and city issues over coffee. In fact, Bach, who we'll mention in a minute, he wrote a coffee cantata while he lived in Leipzig. And the West German Chancellor and the East German Prime Minister met in Leipzig over coffee in 1990 to talk about German reunification. Speaking of German reunification, a very important building in that struggle was St. Nicholas Church, which is the oldest church in the city. The church also in 1982 started a weekly prayer for peace on Monday nights that is continued every Monday to this day. But during the 80s, these Monday night services especially kind of became a place where anti-communist, pro-democracy ideology grew. And eventually, it led to what's known as the peaceful protest the peaceful revolution, that eventually toppled the communist regime in October of 1989. So how many? That's 35 years ago. 100,000 Leipzigers went through the street protesting against the regime. And because it wasn't violent, they just allowed it to continue. And 3 days later, it tripled in number to 300,000. And eventually, a few weeks later, you had people dancing on the Berlin Wall with the fall of the communist regime. Now there's also a St. Nicholas column just outside the church, which mimics the ones inside and is meant to represent the transition of those ideologies from inside the church into the streets. We also have some sobering but playful statues that poke fun at the various regimes of the 20th century. We have this everyday worker who fittingly on the right side, he has the Nazi salute. And on the left side, he has the raised palm of communism to represent the two regimes that he had to struggle his way through. We also have this statue, which is called Untimely Contemporaries, that pokes fun at a few exaggerated caricatures of hypocritical East Germans. For example, on the left, we have a school teacher with her mallet to hammer the communist ideology into her students. We also have the St. Thomas Church. It's the place that Martin Luther first introduced the Protestant Revolution to the people of Leipzig. It's also where Bach spent his adult years as the music director and the director of the boys' choir. To this day, the best regarded boys' choir in all of Germany performs in this church. And Bach was extremely prolific during this time, though he really wasn't popularized during his lifetime. It wasn't until another Leipzig resident, Felix Mendelssohn, brought him back into the public eye in the 19th century that his music really gained popularity. There's also a small museum for him in this plaza. And we're going to finish our quick blitz of Leipzig with the Carly district, which is the trendy hipster neighborhood. You get these cool artistic buildings, you get cute restaurants and food festivals, and of course, some very quirky public art. It is just a fun place to walk around and really makes you feel like you're in a mid-sized Berlin. So it's very well connected by rail, and I also hope that you make some time for Leipzig on your next trip to Germany.
Oh, that was fantastic, Gabe. Yes, and you brought back some memories for me.
Yeah, you've also been.
Yes, and one of my friends is a graduate of the University of Leipzig, so I visited her.
Is that Angela?
No.
Oh,
Unfortunately, I only know her former director of food safety. I don't know. I don't know Angela directly.
We're still within the right amounts of degrees of separation. We'll make it happen.
Okay. Well, next, Gabe, we will discuss the Mosel Valley, but actually we have our own Cameron Hewitt, who was kind enough to share his thoughts on the Mosel, because the Rhine, of course, has been a popular tourist destination for many years, but the Mosel is sometimes overlooked. So let's take a listen to what Cameron has to say.
I always enjoy listening to Cameron.
So do I. Hello, Monday night travelers. We have a special guest joining us tonight to share one of his favorite backdoor destinations in Germany. It's our head of content, Cameron Hewitt. Hi, Cameron.
Hey there, Ben. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody in Monday Night Travel Land. I'm just back from a very busy year of travels, and I'm excited to tell you about one of the places I went this spring. And it's one of my favorite little corners of Germany, and that is the Mosel Valley, their Mosel Valley, Moseltal in German. This is a wonderful, beautiful corner of Germany, and a lot of people going to Germany tend to go to the Rhine River Valley for good reason. It's a really fascinating historic place. The Mosel is really just about an hour's drive, less than an hour's drive away, and it has a lot of the same features as the Rhine Valley, but it's quieter, it's a little more peaceful, it's a little mellower. It's just a really relaxing place, I would say. The Rhine is a little more intense. You've got trains going through all the time, and you've got big shipping containers going down the river. Mosel is a little bit dreamier, a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit easier. This picture really captures what you would see and do in the Mosel Valley, right? You've got vineyards, you've got cute villages, you've got castles, and of course, you've got the beautiful Mosel River itself. It's also the home of what Rick Steves has always said is his all-time favorite castle. Burg Eltz is just in the hills above the Mosel Valley. And you know, I haven't been to the Mosel in about 20 years. It's been a really long time, and I went back this spring. It was in, I think, May, to update our Rick Steves guidebook. And reading that in the book, I was reminded, oh, Rick really loves this place. And I kind of went in thinking, is it really that great? And going back here for the first time in 20 years, I completely understand why Rick loves Burg Eltz. What's so great about it? Well, for one thing, to reach the castle, you have to park and walk 15 minutes through this beautiful forest. And then you come around a bend. And this really dramatic castle pops out into view. You walk across the bridge into the inner courtyard of this castle. It's actually 3 different family castles that have grown together as one compound. And you do a wonderful guided tour that takes you through all of the rooms inside and really learn the history of the place. It's sort of a classic German or European castle. Burg Eltz is really a highlight. My favorite place to stay on the Mosel is a little tiny roadside town called Beilstein. Here again, I spent some time here, something like 20 years ago. And in my mind, I always kind of thought of it as being sort of the ultimate cute German town. It was always just this sort of like, when I thought of all the places I love in Germany, this always was sort of at the top of the list. And you know, over time, sometimes I've traveled a lot since then. I've seen a lot more parts of Europe. You start to wonder, is it really that great? You kind of look back and you think, well, maybe I was young then and I didn't really realize that it wasn't that great. I went back here and spent a few nights while I was working on our guidebook. And I got to tell you, I loved it as much, if not more, than I ever did before. I think Beilstein might be the most charming little town in Germany. It's right along the river. It's squeezed between a castle and a bunch of vineyards and the Mosel River. And what do I love about it? It's just super charming. It's just like, you know, if Epcot had a Germany pavilion. I guess Epcot does have a Germany pavilion now that I think about it. This is sort of a better version of that because it's a real village. It's a real place, beautiful half-timbered buildings, super charming squares, cobbled squares with a combination of those half timbers and stony structures. It also has one of my favorite hotels I've stayed at in a really long time. The Hotel Haus Lippmann is this beautiful, classic European mom and pop family-run hotel. It's been run by the Lippmann family for I think 3 or 4 generations. Again, I stayed here a long, long time ago, and going back, I thought, well, it's probably kind of gone downhill. And I stepped through the door, and it's exactly what I remember. Beautiful hotel, super charming traditional rooms. I walked to the window and opened the window, and I had this spectacular sunset view looking out over the Mosel River. They also have a beautiful restaurant deck, a terrace looking out over the river that had some of the best classic German food that I've had in a very long time. There's not a lot to do in Beilstein. It's more of a home base. There's a castle over town that you can hike up to and get some really nice views. But I would say it's mainly a home base town. And it's really works well for drivers because you can get there with a combination of buses and boats, but it's a little more complicated if you don't have a car. 10 minutes away from Beilstein by car is the other possible home-based town, which is called Cochem. And Cochem is a bigger town. It's better connected. It has a train station. If you don't have a car, it's not quite as dreamy as Beilstein, but it's still a good place to stay. And I got to say, again, it's interesting to look back at places 20 years ago or whatever. When I was last in Cochem, I thought, well, it's just kind of a functional transit point. There's not a lot of charm to it. And either I've changed in this case or Kochum has changed, because I was completely charmed by this beautiful riverside town. It's kind of a small city, a large town, small city, not a cute little village like Beilstein, but it still has a tremendous amount of charm. In fact, I was staying in the area for a few days, and I thought, I'd just kind of run through Kochum one time to get our update ready for the guidebook, and then I wouldn't come back. I ended up coming back 2 other times, including once on my day off, just to enjoy hanging out in this wonderful town of Kochum. There's just a nice kind of a bustle. It's actually a really popular vacation destination for Germans. And I always find it really is interesting to go to a domestic tourism destination. It kind of reminds me of, I live out in Seattle, and maybe the Oregon coast, Newport, Oregon is one of these towns, or maybe Branson, Missouri, or maybe the Jersey Shore, right? It's a place where people from other countries don't come for vacation, but locals who live not that far away like to come and hang out. And that gives it a really fun kind of relaxed holiday feeling to it. Most of the tourists are Germans. There's very few Americans visiting here. And then it's also catering to kind of middle-class tourists, right? So there's this wonderful bakery, not a bakery, a butcher right on the main square of Kochum. And I sat out and had this lunch, which I think cost me all of 5 or 6 euros, sitting out with this $1 million view of this perfect little square of Kochum. It's that kind of place. And then afterwards, I love these little vacation customs. So like when I go to the Oregon coast, I always get saltwater taffy. Well, when Germans go on vacation, they get something called a spaghetti ice. And if you've been to Germany and vacation places, you know, spaghetti ice is basically ice cream that's been pressed through this mold. So it sort of looks like noodles. And then they put like a strawberry sauce on it that's supposed to look like tomato sauce. And then they sprinkle some more, you know, tasty things on top that are supposed to look like Parmesan. And so everyone around there, all these German tourists are eating their spaghetti ice walking down the street. And of course, I had to join them. And I love kind of going vacation local style, and Kochum is a good place to do that. One of the things Kochum is famous for, and the Mosel in general, are riverboat cruises. It's a great place to just get on one of these big boats and enjoy going up and down the river. Now, I was there, it was late May of this year, and like a lot of places in our world these days, extreme weather is getting worse and worse, and the Mosel was flooded. In fact, the weekend before I was there, I wouldn't have been able to get to some of these places. I just happened to be there right after some of the floodwaters have subsided. And so even the embankment here to get to these boats was completely flooded when I was in Kochum. And they told me they had just started running the boats again because of these storms that had happened a week or two earlier. So that's just a reminder in general. Anywhere you travel these days, you just have to be realistic about climate change and the fact that our extreme weather is very likely to affect your plans. And you know, keep an eye on the local news and the local weather, and be prepared to make different plans if you have to. Another thing, in addition to these riverboat cruises, that the Mosel is very famous for is wine. This is one of the oldest and one of the most popular wine growing regions in Germany. It's one of the northernmost wine growing regions anywhere in the world. It's kind of a cool climate, but the slopes of the Mosel are positioned just so and have just the right composition that you get some really good, mostly white wines. And so another very popular activity throughout the Mosel, but especially here in Kochum, is to do wine tastings. And again, working on our guidebook, I'm always looking for new places. I walked across the river from the old town, and I found this really delightful kind of, it's sort of a trendy old meets new wine bar where you can sample very traditional wines in a fun kind of somewhat trendy setting out on the riverside, sit out on their beautiful lawn. Kochum and the Mosel in general is just a great place to relax. There's no kind of intense, high stakes sightseeing here. It's just fun and easy. Now, looming up over the old town of Kochum is this castle that, when I see this picture, all I can think is Hogwarts. It looks like the Hogwarts castle, doesn't it? It's sort of a classic, traditional European Gothic, neo-Gothic castle. It's actually called the Reichsburg, and it's a really fun castle to tour. You can hike up or take the bus up. And what's interesting about this castle, I came to learn when I was traveling around the Rhine and the Mosel, you think about, why do you want to go to this castle or that castle? And there are castle purists who would say, I only want to see an original castle that's the way it was hundreds of years ago. The Reichsburg is not that. This is a real old castle, but a lot of it had ruined, and so it was rebuilt, in the late 1800s. So it's a little over 100 years old. So it's a romantic kind of neo-medieval castle. But that said, it's still a really fun place to visit. A great place to kind of, again, get that sort of Hogwarts ambiance and to learn about the history of the local business magnate who built this. Rebuilt this in the 19th century as kind of their own personal estate overlooking the town, and some really beautiful rooms. It reminded me a little bit, in a very small scale, of Neuschwanstein, that famous Bavarian castle. It's obviously not that elaborate or that grand, but it dates from about the same period. And like Neuschwanstein, it's really going for that kind of neo-medieval approach. And so it has that, definitely has that feel to it. There's another really interesting site in Cochem. I love making these discoveries. And I love offbeat sites where you don't expect them. You just saw how dreamy this town is. Well, it also happened to be the location of an underground Cold War era bunker that the German government built during the Cold War, basically to store currency, to make sure that the German Deutschmark couldn't be sabotaged by enemies, right? And so they stored, I think, something like 30 billion in Deutschmarks in this underground bunker, just in case something happened. And they also, I took a tour of this place, and it's just, you get all these amazing stories. They also printed an alternate version of the Deutschmark with a slightly different design, and they printed billions of these, and they stored them here. The idea was, if anything were to happen to the real Deutschmark that undermined it, let's say the USSR flooded the market with fake ones, and so people couldn't tell what was counterfeit, they actually had a secondary Deutschmark that they had ready to distribute to replace it. Fascinating, right? And here this amazing site is in this really dreamy town in the middle of a very rural part of Germany. And that was part of the reason they did it. In fact, it's advertised as the secret bunker, and even local people didn't know it was here until after the Cold War, even though it was buried under one of their mountains. So that's basically Cochem, and that's the Mosel. Again, it's a beautiful, dreamy, easygoing, relaxing place to take a kind of a break from your busy vacation. Just less than an hour's drive away from the Rhine. So consider that on your next trip to Germany.
Oh, Cameron, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about the Mosel with us. And, you know, I went probably 8 years ago, and you're right. It really is just like a fairy tale.
Yep. Yeah. Wonderful place. Very relaxing.
I have just a couple follow-up logistical questions. You mentioned that this is a great place to relax, not as busy as the Rhine. Is the Mosel, Cochem, Beilstein, a place where travelers can still be spontaneous and not reserve accommodations? Or do you think that that's still a good idea?
Because it's so popular with German tourists, I'd be a little bit careful, especially when they're on vacation. So the summertime, I happen to be there around the time in May. There's a couple of holiday weekends in Germany, and I would be really careful not to try to be too spontaneous on a holiday weekend in Germany if you're going to one of these places. But at other times, yeah, my sense was there's a fair amount of accommodations. It's a little bit looser. I think it is a place you could be a little bit more fancy free, as long as you're aware of, you know, school vacations, basically, because it gets very, very crowded at those times.
Right. Yeah, that variation makes sense. Also, we sort of have this tussle nowadays in small towns in some parts of Europe as they transition from cash to card. And I know that Beilstein may not even have an ATM, for example. Is this the place where cash is still something that travelers should have on hand?
Yes, for sure. And I think you're right. Beilstein doesn't have an ATM. There are a couple in Cochem. I think just in the last couple of years, some of those restaurants in Beilstein that used to not even take cards, they do take cards now, but you are going to run into, in places like this, you are going to run into some cash only type businesses. So it's always a good idea, not just to get cash, but to get it when you're in the larger towns and not necessarily wait until you're in the out of the way villages.
That is so smart. Well, those are all the questions I have for you now, Cameron. I appreciate you sharing beautiful Mosel with us.
Thank you very much. It's been fun to talk about one of my favorite places in Germany.
Always wonderful to hear from Cameron. He does such a great job at discussing an array of topics when he covers a destination.
I know. I think I need to stop doing Monday Night Travel because my list of places I want to go is growing so much faster than I can actually go to places.
Well, here's another one for you to add, Gabe. I know we're not finished yet. Okay, we're going to stick to central Germany, an hour and 10 minutes from Frankfurt, going east, just over the border into the federal state of Bavaria. We have Würzburg along the romantic road and the Rhine River. Gabe, what do we have here?
So here we have, this was 5 years ago, October 2019. We always at Rick Steves Europe have a Halloween contest, and me and some of my travel center colleagues went as the romantic road. I'm Nordlingen, but Würzburg on the far right, some of you might recognize our own dear Julianne Worden, who went as Würzburg. And so, in my opinion, this is the only map of the romantic road that you need.
What more?
Exactly correct.
What more do you need? We should include this in the guidebook.
I agree.
Okay, well, Würzburg itself is a lively city with 25,000 students, very pedestrianized and awfully easy to navigate. The city is surrounded by vineyard-laced hills, making for great views and an excellent calf workout if you're up for that. This is my old friend Kylix, who lives near Koblenz. He met me for the day. The city is crowned by the 13th century Marienburg Fortress. Its grounds are free to visit. Tours are also available. It's not the main site, but it definitely is worth heading up there for the views at the very least. And there you see them. Spectacular. It also has a well-manicured garden. The primary site, the most worthwhile site at least, is the residence. And this is a dramatic 360-room palace of the former Prince Bishop. It has many grand rooms, 3D art, and a massive fresco. And the gardens alone make it almost like a mini Versailles. Maybe not quite that impressive, but on the way there. It's a stunning building. Impressive compound. But after all your hiking and time at the residence are over, really, this is central Germany. This is a region of wine. There's nothing like going to one of Würzburg's many wine bars, going for a stroll along the Rhine River, and taking in the beauty of the city. It really is very charming. I was really impressed by it, actually, and I can understand why Rick chose to add it to the book. So being on a river, like many rivers in Germany, there are fantastic bike trails. And this is really a wonderful way to get off the beaten path because you can cover ground more quickly. So Kylix and I rented a bike from Würzburg and headed north along the Main. We had no destination in mind, but it's Germany. It's fairly well populated. We knew we were going to hit, we would hit a village at some point, and we did. Weitschockheim, just an idyllic little German suburb of Würzburg with its own Schloss. Even this little village has its own castle and garden and charming streets. So we refueled ourselves with ice cream. But it's just a reminder that you can easily find your own back doors. There are many ways to do that. Renting a bike is certainly one of mine. So do remember to try to make an effort and get off the beaten path when you are in Germany. And that is my quick look at Würzburg.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. I appreciated that tour, and we are now going to move on from rivers to lakes. So many of us have probably heard of Lake Constance, which is at the very southern border of Germany. But in Germany, they actually distinguish between the Bodensee, which is the larger part, and the Untersee, which is the smaller part. And you can see, it's a little hard to tell, but you can see the Rhine River there connecting with the Untersee. So this is a place where all of this is connected to the Rhine. And I had the privilege last year of being at the Untersee. This is me in 2023, having just arrived at the rail station in the small city of Radolfzell, which is the hometown of one of my best friends here in Seattle. So you see him there in the middle. That is my friend Linus, or Linus in German. And those of you who have watched a lot of Monday Night Travel might recognize my other friend on the right. That is Micah Meyer, who joined us a couple summers ago to discuss the US national parks. I had the privilege of traveling with these two in the Germanic world last summer. And we stayed with Linus's parents. His dad is showing me where we are on the map, and his mom, Silly, made us an incredible homemade dinner. We were very spoiled. But Radolfzell is just a very charming but livable small city. There aren't really many sights to behold. It's just extremely pleasant, and I could imagine a wonderful place to grow up. But on one of, and here you can see just cute little signs in the direction of the train station, the Bahnhof, and to the sea, the See. But on a free day that we had, Linus wanted to take us on a little day trip around the Untersee. And so I am going to take you all on that same day trip now. And I would like to start with a little trip to Reichenau Island. And I have a little video of my travels there. So let's get going to Reichenau.
From Radolfzell, we set off to travel clockwise around the Untersee. We drive through the lakeside town of Allensbach, complete with onion dough, into the breezy district of Constance, and on to the idyllic and historic Reichenau Island in all its half-timbered, bike-friendly glory. Our first stop is the site that put this sleepy island on the map, the Reichenau Abbey.
We're here at the Reichenau Abbey on the Reichenau Island in Lake Constance, and the Reichenau Abbey used to be home to a school and a scriptorium and an artist's workshop that made it one of the best sources of illuminated manuscripts in all of Europe in the late 10th and early 11th centuries. So it was quite an influential monastery, and today is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
The simple church of St. Mary and Marcus is the oldest on the island. It was first built from wood in 724 by the monastery's founder, Pyrmont. 20 years later, it was leveled up into a stone structure. In the 9th century, the attached cloister and monk's house expanded to accommodate the 134 hard-working monks. Today, these rooms house municipal offices, the cellars are used for pressing local wines, and the whole island boasts its monastic heritage. The abbey features on postcards and wine bottles, while abbots grace everything from maintenance vehicles to City Hall itself. Beyond its monastic history, Reichenau is famous for its flowers and vegetable gardens, nurtured by a Mediterranean microclimate. Abbot Walafrid Strabo, who penned poems about his herb garden, even praised the island as Insula Felix, Ogia Felix, beloved island, island of happiness.
So you can see right there, the local wines that they produce are called Ogia Felix, after that quote from the abbot. And yeah, they had a great little winery there. And again, it has a microclimate that makes it feel very Mediterranean. So a wonderful place to vacation and stop by. We also stopped by the city of Constance, for which Lake Constance is named. We walked along the river, saw some interesting street art. This is another big university town, so you'll see lots of fun art, lots of impressive buildings. We walked through the historic core and made our way out to the harbor front. But I am glossing over this right now because I was only there for 3 hours, but our colleague Gretchen was there for 3 years. And in just a few moments, she's going to tell us a bit more about Constance. For right now, though, I want to take you to Stein am Rhein, and I'm actually cheating because this is in Switzerland. Going around the Untersee, you do dip into Switzerland for a little bit. And while Cameron may have found the most charming town in Germany in the Mosel Valley, I think that I found the most charming town in Switzerland with Stein am Rhein. So I have another quick little video to catalog my time in Stein am Rhein.
Continuing our journey into Switzerland, we traverse the bridge to the tiny island of Würd, located where the Rhine and the Untersee meet. In 759, Othmar, the first abbot of nearby St. Gall, rejected a land grab from 2 greedy counts, earning him exile on this 4-acre island where he died 6 months later. His remains were later returned to St. Gall, but in the 10th century, this chapel was built on Würd in his honor. Today, the chapel belongs to the Benedictines, but is leased to the Franciscans. Laced in lavender and nestled beside a bird sanctuary, Würd is a peaceful place to reflect or go for a scenic spin through the meditative labyrinth. Labyrinth complete, we trek back over the bridge where we can see our final stop, Stein am Rhein, in the distance.
Hello, fellow travelers. I am here at the small Swiss town of Stein am Rhein, which means rock on the Rhine. This is where the Rhine River empties out from Lake Constance, and one of the few places in this region where you have Switzerland on both sides of the river rather than Germany on one side and Switzerland on the other. You can see we have the church here, and then way up there we have the castle. So this is a wonderful place to visit if you are along Lake Constance and just want a quiet, small, idyllic, and beautiful town to explore, which I'm going to go do now.
Stein am Rhein has plenty of claims to history. Remnants of Roman walls, the well-preserved Abbey of St. George, the oldest church in Canton Schaffhausen, the hilltop Hohenklingen Castle from the 13th century, and the Lindwurm Museum of 19th century local life. Mostly though, walking through Stein am Rhein feels like traipsing through a fairy tale world of half-timbered homes, where time stands still. Every building tells stories with vibrant medieval frescoes, and the fountains pump out crisp, cool mountain water. Walking through the town feels like tiptoeing across the pages of a history book. And when we finally leave to return to Radolfzell and the real world, I'm grateful for a modern, united Europe, and for the Schengen zone that allows us to breeze across the border into Germany with ease.
Very well done, Gabe. Those were great.
Thank you. So, yeah, we made our way back to Radolfzell, had another great home-cooked meal. But now that we've gone around the Untersee, I want to finish tonight's tour by talking with our colleague Gretchen about her time living along the Bodensee, the larger part of Lake Constance. So we're going to finish with this little segment from Gretchen, and after this, we are going to get to our Q&A. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat widget, or the Q&A widget rather, and Emily will attend to those. So let's go to the Bodensee. All right, we are joined now by Rick Steves Europe staffer, Gretchen Strauch. Gretchen, welcome to Monday Night Travel.
Hi, Gabe, thanks.
And Gretchen, what is it that you do for Rick Steves Europe?
Well, most of the year, I edit the ricksteves.com website, which is full of free, up-to-date information. We just give it away, keep it up to date. And I also help update our guidebooks. Did a little bit of that this summer. And I also lead our Alpine Europe My Way tour.
Well, it sounds like you stay very busy, and we greatly appreciate it.
I do. I got home 2 months ago, and I still haven't unpacked.
I mean, are you ever really unpacked?
No.
And Gretchen, we're having you on when we talk about Beyond the Best of Germany, because while I was in Constance for 3 hours, you were there for 3 years. Can you share with us what brought you to that part of Germany?
Well, in a nutshell, in my 20s, I had plan A was to go live in Switzerland for a year. And when I got a job in Zurich, when that fell, I was living with friends. When that job fell through, I learned about a job in Munich. So here I was in the Zurich main station, looking at how I could get to Munich, because there's this big lake between Zurich and Munich, and that is the Bodensee, Lake Constance. So I thought, well, no one's really expecting me in Munich. Maybe I'll stop somewhere along the way. And so right there, I decided on a whim to go stop in the town of Constance. And I ended up never going all the way to Munich that day. And I got hired at a language school and ended up staying 3 years.
Well, I suppose sometimes the train you get on makes a very big difference.
It was a pretty fateful train station moment.
We are glad that you did, because today you are going to take us on a little tour along the northern edge of the Bodensee. So I took us on a loop around the little Untersee, which is that lower left-hand body of water. But the Bodensee is much larger, and that northern coast is the German coast. And you are going to take us on a little tour of that, beginning in Constance, which we see starred there.
That's right. So Constance is right there where the Bodensee narrows. It's a swelling of the Rhine, and it ends up flowing under that very important bridge, the only bridge in the region for centuries. So Constance has been around a long time, and flows out there, yes, through the Untersee, and then on out to the ocean, and eventually. And so Constance is right there. The old town of Constance is actually on the southern side of the river, but most of the southern coast of the Bodensee is Swiss. So Constance is unusual. This little bit of Germany, just a little bit south, and then the city is also on both sides of that bridge. And that is a big reason why it is so pretty still. Constance is the rare German city that was never bombed during World War II. And that's because it was so close to Switzerland. It's basically a contiguous town with a smaller Swiss town right next to it, Kreuzlingen. And during the war, the Germans of Constance realized it would be smarter if they to leave their lights on, leave their window drapes open at night, because if they had turned their lights off, it would have been very clear where the Swiss-German border was. But it was unclear if they left all their lights on like the Swiss had, and the Allied bombers certainly weren't going to bomb Switzerland. So they didn't bomb Constance, and it now has this gorgeous, intact medieval streetscape, and it's got, you can see there, somewhat Gothic, is full of different eras, but medieval minster, the cathedral, essentially. It's got a weird mix of styles on the inside, but a beautifully renovated spire that you can see from a long way away. And beyond, it's just a gorgeous cityscape. You can rent a bike. There's just a park-lined lakefront. It's a gorgeous town to stroll through. And one of the things that makes Constance particularly interesting is its church history. So it was the scene of a huge convention, 1414 to 1418. It was called the Council of Constance. And basically the whole idea was that they were going to resolve the papal schism, where they were trying to decide who was going to be the real pope. But it was also a place to fight out this battle that had gone on for a long time between the church and the state, or the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope. And this is commemorated in this amazing statue. It's pretty recent, it's 1993. This statue, made by a local sculptor, was commemorating not just Constance's really important history in the role in the history of the church, but also the important role of the prostitutes, who would have been, I think, in doing good business during the council. Constance would have been sort of it was like a convention that went on for a long time. You had people coming from a long, long ways away. They were there for meetings, and it's sort of like the Vegas of medieval Germany. And when you have a bunch of men coming from a long ways away, you have prostitutes. And this is Imperia. She's named after a Balzac story. But this statue is, you can see, quite large. She actually spins around very slowly, and she's holding in her hands, you could perhaps see in her right hand, she is holding the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund, and in her left, in the palm of her hand, literally, is the Pope, Martin V. And she's controlling things. The prostitutes, at least many historians will tell you, were privy to conversations and rumors, and were brokering a lot of the deals that were happening during the medieval conferences that where Constance got its name. And around town, you'll see some other less controversial statues. My favorite, in a fountain in the middle of the Marktstätte, the main square, are these little sea bunnies, or lake bunnies rather, the Seehasen in German, lake bunnies. And this is a mythical creature particular to the Bodensee, and you'll see references to them all around. And these are the cutest, these little bunny fish right there in the main square. And then I'll mention a few other places to visit around the lake. The one closest to Constance, and definitely the prettiest, is Mainau, the flower island. Mainau, it juts out from the mainland there, but it's quite close to the middle of Constance. It's an easy bus ride. And it's just full of flowers and topiary, like the famous, the ducks, and there's one with a peacock, and yes, the relaxing gnome. And it's a beautiful place to enjoy your coffee and your cake in the afternoon, because you're there to enjoy perhaps just a nice weekend. As a lot of Germans, that's where the kind of place that they would come for a nice afternoon, a long weekend. And then nearby, on the other side of the lake, is Würzburg. Würzburg, a beautiful medieval town, also never bombed, but very small, so not a strategic. Just a pedestrian old town with medieval architecture overlooking the lake. And from there you can see Meersburg on a nice day. You can see the Alps of Appenzell in Switzerland. It's a beautiful view from Meersburg. It's just a not much to do there except stroll around and have more cake. I won't stop you. Then a little farther down the lake, far less pretty, is Friedrichshafen. Yes, you don't go to Friedrichshafen for the medieval architecture, but you do go, or at least many people do, if you're interested in the history of the Zeppelins, which are still made there, and it's the birthplace of the Zeppelin. They have a Zeppelin museum, and on nice days in the Bodensee, you often look up and see these things hovering above in the sky. Yes, the Zeppelin Museum's got information on the Hindenburg disaster. And last stop that I want to mention is the town of Bregenz, which is actually in Austria. And Bregenz has this festival, a big classical music opera festival every year. And every other year, they make this outrageous stage. And it's different every time. There's an amphitheater right there on the lakeside. And if you visit, you can go take a peek at the Seebühne, the lake stage, and see what they've come up with for the year that you're there. It's always outrageous, and it's just a fascinating spectacle. I don't know if you can see the people at the bottom, see the seats at the bottom. You get a sense for how big that massive set is. And I could talk about this all day, but Gabe, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Gretchen, thank you for that tour of the Bodensee. I especially would love to go to that incredible opera festival someday. So thank you for sharing your experiences with us and for all you do for Rick Steves Europe. And I hope that you are able to get unpacked soon.
Same.
All right. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thanks, Gabe.
All right. Another big thank you to both Gretchen and Cameron for contributing to our travels tonight. And I hope that you enjoyed your time along both parts of Lake Constance this evening. We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor and then dive into your questions. And I just want to remind you that we have a wide selection, not just of our Germany guidebook, but of various guidebooks throughout the Germanic world. We, dipped our toes into Austria and Switzerland in that last section. So if you want to combine your German trip into those countries, we also have guidebooks for those. And about half of the destinations that we covered tonight are in our Germany guidebook. But Ben, what can people do if they want information about the other half of the places or other corners of Germany that we don't cover?
Thank you very much, Gabe. Indeed, as Gabe mentioned, our Germany guidebook is excellent and very detailed. However, it doesn't cover every locale in Germany. So what can you do to find out information about some of the places maybe we discussed tonight or others that you might be interested in? Well, we have at ricksteves.com our travel forum. And this is a place where you can go and ask any German travel question you wish. Well, actually, for any country in Europe, essentially. This is just the Germany page that you see here. We have a fantastic, active group of travelers who would be more than willing to help you with your questions for your upcoming German travels. In fact, Gabe, I learned today that we average up to around 2 million visitors a month on the travel forum.
Wait, actually? That's actually much larger than I thought. So yeah, that's 2 million.
Fairly impressive. So definitely consider the travel forum at ricksteves.com for your upcoming travel assistance needs, including your backdoor travel. All right, Gabe, I think it's time for one of my favorite sections of every Monday Night Travel, the Q&A. And I'll make us big for this. What do you say?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. And Emily has been
beautifully collecting questions for us.
Shall I ask you first?
Sure.
Okay. What languages do you speak, Gabe? Do you have any favorite translate app that you use when traveling? This is from T. Hill.
Yes. So I actually used to be a high school Spanish teacher, so I'm fluent in Spanish. I have functional fluency in French. But the most German I did was I audited 1 semester of German in college. So I'm really good at the numbers. That's about it. But there are a few apps that can be helpful. If you just want to be able to translate things on the spot, Google Translate is the go-to app. You can type in things to translate. You can, when I first saw this, it was one of those moments that like I'm living in the future. You could hold your camera up to a sign or even to something handwritten if it's decent handwriting, and the translation will like appear on your phone magically laid over the text. There's also a conversation mode where you can have two people and pretty quickly translate between you. So that is best. In terms of, I always recommend, it's just nice to show respect, to learn a few basic phrases. Hello, good morning, good evening, please, thank you. Do you speak English in the local language? And we include that, actually, we have phrase books, but even those basic survival phrases are in the practicalities section at the back of our guidebooks. And it's just kind of a shortcut to making good friends. A lot of people speak, in Germany especially, almost everyone speaks English, especially younger folks. But just showing that you took the time to learn a bit of their language, I think, causes them to open up a bit more.
Very well answered, Gabe.
Ben, a question for you comes from Richard. You talked about cities like Lübeck and Schwerin and those Hanseatic cities. I always struggle with the question of how long to spend there, because obviously it depends on your interests. But for the average traveler, what would you recommend as a home base, and kind of how much time should they invest in that area?
Well, I think Hamburg is a great home base for most of what I presented earlier in northern Germany. Maybe not quite everything. I think perhaps Schwerin and Wismar may be pushing it. But for everything else, Hamburg is a great home base. And you could make day trips. Lübeck for a whole day. Sure, you can stay longer. In fact, there's a coastal area not far from Lübeck called Travemünde, which is quite beautiful. But most people would find that a busy day in Lübeck is all right. And then there's Stade, there's other places. So I think day trips from Hamburg would be the way to go, unless you really do have significantly more time. Then you can pick a home base further to the east and visit Schwerin, Wismar, and other places I didn't cover north of Berlin that are former Hanseatic cities, such as Stralsund, Greifswald, Rostock, and others. That's what I would suggest, Gabe. Okay, another question for you.
Right.
How easy is it, Gabe? This is from Bob, by the way, for vegetarians to get by in smaller towns, and how easy is it to travel by car?
So in terms of travel by car, generally easy. I actually drove, my first time ever driving a rental car in Europe was in Germany last year, and I got caught by a traffic camera. So don't do that. I just was too busy looking at my directions and didn't realize the speed limit had changed. But I found it very simple. It's great infrastructure, nice highways. You're driving on the same side of the road. As your resident vegetarian, though, here at Rick Steves Europe, I can hardly think of a time that I've really struggled. I always just tell people, if you want to stay strict with your dietary restriction while you're traveling, you have to be prepared for, 75% of the time, I feel like I get to eat something equally as interesting and authentic and regional as my meat-eating friends, like traveling in Germany and getting their asparagus soup at the beginning of the summer, or having a nice, German cheeses, and there's a wide variety of regional delicacies that you can have. But I say 25% of the time, you have to be content eating a salad or some sauteed vegetables or just a pretty basic sandwich. I don't know if this is regional everywhere, but once in Cologne, they had a meal that they called half a hen. I was like, I want people to eat that. And they're like, oh, no, it's vegetarian. And it was just a really good piece of cheese and a really great piece of bread, which is pretty simple, but I like cheese and bread.
Yeah.
So, but I never had any issues. I will say, especially if you have like allergies, but really any dietary restrictions, it's wise to translate your dietary restriction and print out some small pieces of paper that you could give to wait staff. Again, in Germany, they speak really great English, but just to be safe, there are these cards called FARE. You Google FAIR cards, I forget the acronym, but they actually have a site where they'll help you translate it and give you kind of printable cards.
Yeah, that point about the card, that's great, Gabe.
So Ben, another question for you. Let's see, where did it go? Oh, Caroline, or Carolyn rather, wants to know, can you explore the Mosel by train and bus? How effectively can you do that?
I can say that there is a train line to Kolkum, regional train at least, but there isn't one to Beilstein, I believe. So if you are looking to stay in Kolkum and experience the Mosel there, then you can just stick to public transit. If you want to stay in Beilstein, you might consider a car. I think it would be easier. Burg Eltz, the castle that Cameron discussed, and Rick's favorite castle in Europe, that is reachable by train, but it's at the stop Mosel Kern, and it requires a little bit of a hike. I want to say it's something like half an hour, 40 minutes, I believe, from Mosel Kern train station to Burg Eltz. So if you're okay with that, then again, train is all right. If not, then you might consider a car. And of course, you have that added flexibility with the car. And as Gabe mentioned, driving in Germany is fairly straightforward. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Wonderful. And Ben, I think I would like to finish with a question for our audience, actually. We've enjoyed doing this Beyond the Best of series. And we know that all of you like to hear about these backdoor destinations. So we've now done Spain, Italy, and Germany. So before you sign off, we'd love to hear in the Q&A which country you would most like to see a Beyond the Best of episode for next. And that will help us as we do some scheduling for the winter.
That's a great question, Gabe. I'm curious to see the responses. I'm thinking France might do fairly well.
I agree, but there might be some surprises.
All right. Well, I think it's time for closing announcements, Gabe.
Yes, so I just want to remind everybody, we actually are also soliciting your feedback in another way. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Monday before Thanksgiving, we are going to do a show on travel gratitude, kind of doing reflection on our travels for the year. The Monday Night Travel team will share some of our favorite travel memories, but we also want to hear some of yours. So please send an email to share@ricksteves.com, share@ricksteves.com, and please include in that email just one paragraph about your wow moment of your travels this year, and then also a couple photos that you wouldn't mind having shared on the show potentially.
Excellent. Thank you, Gabe. And with that, I would like to invite all of you to join us next week when Rick Steves will be back once again to present his fascism special and provide insights into how travel and politics abroad has influenced his political thinking. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Gabe, always a pleasure to work with you on Monday Night Travel. 4 years now, I believe.
I know. We're coming up on our 4-year anniversary. All right. Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you to all of you for joining, and we hope to see you next week.